Andrzejewski joins us now to talk about how the federal government was able to spend $97 billion in a single month last year. He serves as founder and CEO of the group OpenTheBooks.com. Explain first what your group does and why you do it.
Well, thank you, John. Thanks for having me in studio. At OpenTheBooks.com, our mission can be summarized in a simple description: every dime online in real time. So our mission is literally to capture every dime taxed and spent at every level of government across the entire country and put this in a database online on our website in our free mobile app. It's called Open the Books. It's free for Apple and Android. And this allows regular people where they live to see exactly where their tax dollars are going, with the objective to hold the political class accountable for tax and spend decisions.
How long have you been doing this, and why did you get into this work?
So we launched OpenTheBooks.com in Illinois. We're headquartered in Illinois. It is the Super Bowl of corruption, and we thought transparency would be that silver bullet to where bad actors would start to self-censor their bad decisions. And so we launched in Illinois in 2011 with the pay and pensions of virtually every single public employee at every level of Illinois government. Now, I'm proud to say that last year we did this for the entire country. We actually captured virtually every single salary and pension record of all public employees at every level in the country.
For transparency purposes, is this something that you make money doing?
Well, we don't. We're a public charity. So we're an IRS-recognized 501c3 public charity. And I spent the first 4 years not taking a salary from the entity. And then finally, 2 years ago, I took $28,000 that year.
It's OpenTheBooks.com if viewers want to check it out. Their latest report is about federal spending in September of last year, a month that you say the federal government refers to as Christmas in September. Why?
Well, we've been looking at this over the course of the last 4 years, and last year was the worst ever. This was a big party funded by taxpayers. So $97 billion went out the door in the last month of the fiscal year in September of 2018. Now, to put this in perspective, 1 out of every $10 on the year in federal contracts went out the door in the last week. In the last week, the agency spent $53 billion. So in the first week, they spent $8 billion, and then it went to $18 billion in the second week. The third week was $17 billion, and $53 billion in the final week of the fiscal year.
Why the surge at the end of the fiscal year? Why are they moving the money out the door?
So it's a phenomenon called use it or lose it spending. So the federal agency heads, they spend down their budgets this year, so Congress will appropriate the same amount of money or more next year. And this has been going on for decades.
And if you want to chat about this issue with Andrzejewski, you can join the conversation this morning. It's 202-748-8000 for Democrats, 202-748-8001 for Republicans, 202-748-8002 for independents. A chart on some of the agencies that participated in this rush of money out the door at the end of the fiscal year. It's topped by the Department of Defense, moving some $61 billion out the door in the month of September last year, and then it falls off to about $5.6 billion for the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Veterans Affairs at $5.2 billion. Start with the Department of Defense. What were they spending the money on?
So a lot of the money at the Department of Defense was spent on fixed-wing aircraft. It was spent on vessels and ships. But we also noticed some very interesting charges. For example, at the Department of Defense, they bought nearly $10,000 of club leather chairs. They renewed their sponsorship in PBR, professional bull riders. They spent nearly $5 million on lobster tail and snow crab in the last month of the fiscal year. Now, John, we took a look at that expenditure on lobster tail. Last year, in fiscal year 2018, the Pentagon spent $22 million on lobster tail. Over the course of the last 4 years, they've spent $55 million purchasing lobster tail.
What are the questions you think this report raises that members of Congress who look through this report should be asking?
So I think that our report highlights what should be a bipartisan issue. The Democrat-controlled House, the Republican-controlled Senate, they should want to stop this practice of use it or lose it spending. Specifically to the Democrats in the House, they should get back to regular order. Obviously, the appropriations start in the House. Only 4 times in the last 40 years has the House delivered a budget on time. And I think this use it or lose it spending and the largesse of it and the waste of it is because they are not holding committee hearings, subcommittee hearings, and a staffer is not responsible, like they used to be, for every single line of that budget. There needs to be accountability in Congress. Congress needs to crack down.
Is regular order going to do anything, though, to stop that rush to make sure the books are cleared or the money is off the books at the end of the year?
So it would definitely help. Another piece that would also help, there's 2 other reforms that can be brought. U.S. Senator Rand Paul has a bill, and it's bonuses for the bureaucrats that actually cut their budgets. So if you save money on your budgets rather than spend it all, you would get a bonus. That's a piece of legislation that should be considered by both the House and the Senate. Here's another reform. The way they do their budget needs to be reformed. The largest corporations in the world use zero-based budgeting. This is where you start at the ground level and you build your budget up. And then at the end of the day, every single line item has to be justified. It has to be audited. And the federal government, just like our major corporations, should get to a zero-based budgeting platform.
Let you chat with a few callers. Again, if you want to join in, Democrats, it's 202-748-8000. Republicans, 202-748-8001. Independents, 202-748-8002. Joseph is in New Rochelle, New York, a Republican. Go ahead.
Yes, I have an idea, which to me makes sense. If you're allocated $100, let's say, and you only spend 80, why must you spend the other 20 at the end of the year? You save 20, and now you get that 20 back, and you actually get $20 less, but you still have the same budget in the next year. That's how you save the people money. But all you're doing is spending money, spending money, spending money. Then if you want a 5% raise and you get a 2% raise, they call it a cut. You still got a raise. That's the idiocy of the whole program.
Well, this is common sense, and thank you very much for your call. You're spot on. The entire budget and appropriation process is broken. Look, we've called at openthebooks.com. We've called on President Trump as commander-in-chief to wage war on waste. The president, he vowed, he ran on draining the swamp, and unless he gets his arms and hands around spending, his promise to drain the swamp is going to ring hollow.
Matthew is in California, also a Republican. Go ahead.
Yeah, how you doing? Could you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hello? Yeah, I just wanted to, I'm watching this Adam, I can't pronounce his last name, but I just wanted to tell you that what he's talking about, this end-of-year dump fund, is 100% correct. I did 23 years active duty. I worked in transportation for the Seabees and Special Warfare, and I know guys that actually got awards, Navy Achievement Medals, for spending their end-of-year dump funds. Every single September and October, they come out and they say, we have to spend umpteen dollars, but we spend the rest of the entire year holding money back. And like I used to work in transportation, I worked on equipment. One year I would give them a budget because I have a bunch of new equipment, or what we call seats, and they would say, oh, okay, well, here's your money. Then 2 years down the road, I would give them the budget. They would say, well, why do you want this much money this year? And I'd say, well, I have an older amount of equipment now, so now I need to start maintenance it. But every single year, and literally, I used to be really fiscally responsible when I started doing it. Literally, I would get in trouble for being too fiscally responsible. Special Warfare in Coronado, California does that terribly in the tens of billions and billions of dollars.
Matthew, thanks for the call.
Well, and I want to address the Pentagon spending. So, according to our data captured at openthebooks.com, the Pentagon spends every single year on contract spending about $250 billion. Well, in the last month of the fiscal year, $63 billion went out the door. And I think that calls into question whether this spending, is properly bid, if it's frugal, if taxpayers are getting a good shake on this. And here's the reason why we have a big cause for concern, is because President Trump mandated a first ever audit of the Pentagon. They spent a year. There was 1,200 auditors. They spent nearly $500 million on this audit, and the Pentagon flunked their first ever audit.
I want to show this chart from the latest report from openthebooks.com. The spending at the end of the fiscal year follows a similar trend throughout the month, that it ramps up at the end of the month. Some $12 billion going out the door on September 28th of 2018, $11 billion on September 27th. Can you talk through sort of the ebb and flow here during the month?
So we found on average per day there was $3.2 billion in the month of September in year-end spending, which is a tremendous amount of money. We also felt the federal data was pretty good. We saw significant drops on the weekends, which you would expect. But we did find the first week was at $8 billion. The last week was at $53 billion. So there was a real push to get these contracts out the door before the year closed.
You went through the Department of Defense. The second highest department was the Health and Human Services Department. Can you talk about some of the spending you found there in September of last year?
So there's a lot of HHS consulting contracts. Typically, your largest contractors are at the Department of Defense. It's like Lockheed Martin, and they got nearly $9 billion of contracts in the last 30 days of the fiscal year. Boeing got $5 billion. But you've also got these consulting contractors, and HHS hires a lot of them, like Booz Allen Hamilton. Booz Allen Hamilton, by and large, as consultants, received an incredible $1.1 billion of contracts in the last 30 days of the fiscal year.
The report we're talking about, the federal government's use it or lose it spending spree, how the federal government spent $97 billion in 1 month. Openthebooks.com is the website where you can go to take a look at the report we're talking about. Bruce is waiting in Nashville, Tennessee, an independent. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call. Adam, keep doing what you're doing. Adam is right on point with the use it or lose it, but it's not only the executive branch, it's also the legislature and the judiciary. I retired from the judiciary, and it applies there too. Thank you.
Have you looked into the other branches of government?
So, we've captured the federal checkbook, and that's contracts, loans, direct payments, insurance payments, farm subsidies, grants, all the way back to the year 2001. The federal judiciary is pretty opaque in terms of filing Freedom of Information Act requests on the judiciary. I don't think we're going to be able to get our requests through the judiciary branch.
How big is your operation at Open the Books?
So we have about a $2 million budget this year. We've got 30 people, and all they do is file Freedom of Information Act requests every single year. So last year we filed 60,000 of these requests, and we believe that the open government movement is revolutionizing United States public policy and politics, and that's why the platform here to talk about these oversight reports on tranches of federal spending is so important to get the information out to the people. You see, the caller brings up an interesting point. The political class, they don't bring a lot of reforms on spending because it's a lot of work, and they feel they don't have the political upside to take credit for things. But they underestimate the American people. These issues drive us all absolutely crazy. It's our tax dollars, they're being wasted, and we need to raise our voices and hold the politicians accountable.
What first got you into this work?
So being from Illinois, in that corrupt bipartisan atmosphere in my state, after a successful career in business, where my brother and I, we started a business, we grew it from scratch to $20 million over a 10-year period, I searched around for my true passion, which was public policy, for an issue that would really make a difference in my home state. And I settled on and identified this issue of transparency. And over the course of time, I met former U.S. Senator Dr. Tom Coburn from Oklahoma. And today he's our honorary chairman of openthebooks.com. And the reason I like transparency is because it is transpartisan, bipartisan. Coburn, when he was a senator, partnered with then Senator Barack Obama to open the federal checkbook for the first time ever. So although we started in Illinois, we beta tested our transparency models in Illinois. By meeting folks like Dr. Tom Coburn, we've been able to transfer this to the federal level.
Richard is in Massachusetts, a Democrat. Good morning.
Morning.
I don't know how. It's like an opinion from your guest, and thank you for taking this call about how we're going to get away. How are we going to get out of this national debt, which is staggering now, especially with Trump doubling the debt, and the conservative ideology has been thrown out the window. And I know I have an idea of the Republican philosophy for a long time. Nobody voted for Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, not around a socialism diatribe, which is it's a nice political term to really deflate the real inequality of the working class against the top 1% that are getting all the breaks from this administration. But this philosophy from the Republican Party, I believe, has been give everything to the wealthy, and then the trickle-down economics philosophy, which is complete failure. And this is really frightening, because what's going to happen is that we're being put in a box when the working class and the poor are so dependent on these programs, and that's where the cuts are going to come from.
That's Richard in Massachusetts.
So it's a great call, and it's a great perspective, Richard. Here's how we see it. Traditionally, Republicans have castigated Democrats for being tax and spend. But Republicans, once again, have proven that they're tax cut and spend. Under Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, when they had complete control of Congress and the White House, the Republicans, over the course of the last 2 years, took all of Obama-era discretionary spending and hiked it by $300 billion. The president felt he was in a box. He signed those bills. And this is why we suggest to the president that he should declare war on waste. And we've been very specific at openthebooks.com, laying out the strategy to be able to cut the waste, fraud, corruption, and taxpayer abuse from the budget. Step one is the president should open all of the spending in as real time as possible. What we find is this spending posts way too late, up to 6 months after the purchases are made. So open the books. The second thing is the president, we suggested that he should cut 5% of agency spending. 29 days after we published this open letter in the Wall Street Journal, that's when last fall the president issued his order to his cabinet secretaries to cut 5% of their budgets. What we hear is that these cabinet secretaries don't feel that the president is serious. And so the third prong of this is to report to the American people. The president, by declaring war on waste, should report the progress or lack thereof, at least on a monthly basis, to the American people. Now, everybody watching the program can come to our website at openthebooks.com and sign our petition urging the president and Congress to wage war on waste, and 103,000 Americans have signed that petition.
To Wayne, waiting in Asheville, North Carolina, a Republican. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for taking my call. On the spending before the end of the year, I was in the government, and we were told, I had 3 pots of money. We were told you have to have it spent pretty much by the end of the third quarter, because there isn't enough time to go through the federal rigmarole to get the money spent after the end of the third quarter. So in my opinion, it would, some way they should be able to carry money over so that they don't do inappropriate spending with the money they have that they can't get done because you can't get the contract out. Just
Wayne,
one comment.
Wayne, do you mind saying what agency that you worked for?
The Coast Guard.
And go ahead with your comment.
I had 3 pots of money. Beg your pardon?
Go ahead with the comment that you were going to make.
Oh, just one comment on your caller from Massachusetts. It's a socialism. Social Security. We pay for Social Security. That's not socialism. And thank you for taking my call.
So I just want to walk through some of the buckets of money that we found on use it or lose it spending. So, for instance, we found that the agencies literally drove up taxpayer costs. They purchased in the last 30 days $300 million worth of vehicles. Navistar, Ford, General Motors, these were the recipients of those contracts. They also purchased $10 million worth of motorcycles, $750,000 worth of golf carts, and they even purchased $130,000 worth of snowmobiles.
Rock Hill, South Carolina is next. James, Democrat, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for taking my call. Great program. That philosophy of use it or lose it, our local school district does the same thing. And I was an electrician, retired just last year, working, at the district schools here. And when I found that out, just talking to the local principals, I didn't agree with it then. And I'm definitely surprised that at the federal level they have this. And that was my comment. Thank you.
Well, at openthebooks.com, our objective is to capture all spending from all public bodies across the entire country. So not only do we have federal spending, but we also have state, and we're capturing now local spending as well. So in 48 out of 50 states, we have at least 1 year of their state checkbook. Only California and North Carolina are the holdouts. And I'm proud to say that Wyoming last week, after a 5-year fight, we filed a lawsuit. A new state auditor, Christy Racines, sent us 6 years worth of line-by-line transactions in the state of Wyoming. This was a big victory for our team.
A map that the viewers just saw on the screen showed federal spending by individual states. Can you walk through some of the things that viewers should pick out from this map?
So I think the natural question is why? Why is this use it or lose it spending phenomenon occurring? And a large portion of this, the reason is because of political power. Everyone would expect that the majority of the dollars flow into the Washington, D.C. Beltway, into Virginia, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. But in actuality, only 1 out of every $4 flow into the D.C. Beltway. The number 2 state receiving the largesse of use it or lose it spending is actually Texas at about $9 billion. California is 4th largest at about $7 billion. Number 10 is pretty interesting. It's the state of Alabama with about $2.4 billion of use it or lose it end of year spending that flowed into Alabama. But most incredibly, I think, people watching the program will find it pretty interesting that $6.1 billion flowed into 190 countries outside of the United States.
Led by who?
I don't have the country that led it top of mind, John. That's a good question. We'll have to get back to you on that and post that on our website.
Mark is in Queensbury, New York, an independent. Good morning.
Good morning. I have to chuckle at the concept of asking Donald Trump to wage a war on waste. This is a man who lives in a gold-plated penthouse, has known nothing but extravagance his whole life. So good luck with that one. I do applaud what you're doing. But I think what this comes down to for me is taxes. We need a flat tax. Average people bust their hump to try and make enough after-tax money to make ends meet, to send their kids to college, etc., maybe to go on a vacation once a year. Our system is broken at the core, which is the tax base. If we had a 15% flat tax, multiple studies show everything would be much more equitable. The rich would pay their fair share. We wouldn't have these deficits, etc. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, again, it's a good perspective, and I thank you for calling in. The president has put socialism front and center, it looks like, on his messaging for re-election in 2020. Here's our point to the president. You cannot take on socialism by saying that Democrats are going to drain the Treasury from the left if you don't declare war on waste and take on Republicans who are draining the Treasury from the right. So this is why the president needs to declare war on waste, just simply for credibility purposes.
Gerard is in Lawrenceville, Georgia, a Republican. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Doing well.
My mother-in-law used to work commercial sales for Sears, and the federal government would order trailer loads of televisions to spend the money in their budget. And it's not just the federal government. The county here has a slot tax, 1%, and they share it with the cities. Well, the cities have to give it back if they don't spend it. And we had a little town out here named Carl. They spent $86,000 on a pavilion and a water fountain because they were going to have to get it back. Now, this Carl is such a big city, if they took the 2 or 3 signs down, you wouldn't know there was a city there. Thank you very much for doing what you're doing.
Gerard, thanks for the call.
So I think public employees across the entire country are all highlighting the fact that this use it or lose it phenomenon occurs at the local level, the state level, and the federal level. Here's another tranche of use it or lose it spending that we found. And it's on public relations spending and advertising. $500 million, about $500 million flowed out the door in the last 30 days of the fiscal year. And I think this just drives people crazy.
Advertising on what?
So it's all kinds of different things. It's billboards, it's television commercials, it's social media. There are 5,000 public affairs officers employed in 122 federal agencies. But that's not even enough. The federal government spends about $1.5 billion a year with some of the most prominent and successful advertising firms in the country in New York City and other areas, basically using taxpayer dollars to convince taxpayers to spend more taxpayer money on bigger budgets.
Dee is in Okeechobee, Florida. Independent. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning, John. Good morning, Mr. Adam. I can't pronounce your last name. I have a comment to make to you as soon as I'm done talking, but this is about schools. The gentleman from South Carolina, he kind of stole my thunder on the school thing, because I worked at the school, and at the end of the year, they get all this extra money the schools have, and the amount of money, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars they blew at the end of the fiscal year to get rid of that money, so when they get their regular money for the following year, they always get a little bit extra on top of that. Now, that's a fact, okay? So all these schools in every state of this country, okay, are doing this. There's a lot of money that's just being thrown away from the taxpayers. I also have a comment or something I'd like to say to Mr. Adam here. You brought this up now, has nothing really to do with the subject on hand like my school thing did, but you brought up the fact that the Republicans held all three, the Congress and also the White House. I don't know why. Even C-SPAN does the same thing, okay? C-SPAN let these haters come on here, and they say the same thing, that we had full control, okay? We never had full control. They never had full control. And you, Mr. Open Book, okay, you right there says they had full control. You have to have 60 in the Senate, and Republicans never had that.
That's Dee in Florida. Adam Andrzejewski.
Right, these things do have to be negotiated. I think here's some areas for bipartisan reform. There's the 20 largest federal agencies admit that since the year 2003, $1.2 trillion, it's a stunning number, $1.2 trillion has been paid out on an improper basis. Two programs, Medicare and Medicaid, have paid out over $650 billion improperly. So you have doctors out there who have lost their license that are receiving federal payments. You have people that have died that are receiving federal payments. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, they should get together just to put in basic in-house financial accounting controls to make sure that the payments going out the door are paid out properly.
The report's title is about the use it or lose it spending. Can you talk about the lose it side? What actually happens to money that isn't spent?
So that's actually a long answer and kind of a big mystery on Capitol Hill, because we've been asking these questions amongst very powerful people and their staffs, what actually happens at the end of the day. And the best answer that we can get is it's a mixed bag. Depending on the appropriation, sometimes it is carried over. So there are trillions of dollars that have been appropriated by Congress but never spent, that are sitting in these accounts. What we want to know is that if that money has already been, quote, spent and has also contributed to the national debt of $22 trillion.
Time for one or two more calls. Terry has been waiting in Iowa, Republican. Go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to comment on some things. I worked for the state of Iowa for like 40 years ago, and I'm retired now, but I worked 40 years ago for the state, and one of the first things they did was we had an orientation. And that time I was getting orientated, they took me around and were showing me the buildings and stuff that I was going to be working on. I was working in maintenance. And we went behind one of the buildings, and there was a big hole dug, and there were some guys cutting up extension ladders with sawzalls. And I asked the guy that was touring me, so what's going on there? And he says, well, we have a budget, and every year we have to spend that budget. And if we don't spend that budget, the next year they reduce our budget by the money that we didn't spend. So we have to cut up and get rid of things and buy new things. And I was just flabbergasted. It was my first time. I was like 19 years old, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is my tax dollars. As I worked for the next 2.5 years there, I could not believe the waste, the spending,
the money. And the employees themselves, if half the people that worked there did their jobs and were held accountable for their jobs, you wouldn't have needed the other half.
Terry, thanks for the call.
So the national debt is at $22 trillion. And let's put that in perspective for regular people. On a per-person basis, per man, woman, and child in the country, your share, John, and my share is $65,000. And so what that means in a family of four is your household share of the national debt is $260,000. That's why these fiscal issues are so important. And I don't care if you're Obama's former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mike Mullins. He said that the national debt is the nation's biggest security concern, the biggest security threat. We agree with that. Our honorary chairman, Dr. Tom Coburn, he was Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in the world in 2013. He wrote the book, The Debt Bomb. This is why we need to get our financial house in order.
Last call for you, Homer in Broken Bow, Oklahoma, independent. Good morning.
Good morning. John, thank you for taking my call. Adam, I appreciate what you're doing. The quest for full transparency is truly honorable, but we're experiencing a dishonorable group in, I believe, Congress. I actually relocated from California working in commercial printing, and we, in that field, had preferred vendors. My question to you, Adam, is how does the bidding factor in, and what degree does spoilage also have an influence?
So the contracts are procured obviously by the program managers and the bureaucrats that work within the agencies. Here's what we would advocate. We would advocate a new type of bidding process, and it uses the latest in technology, and it's called a reverse auction, a Dutch auction. So amongst qualified bidders that are pre-qualified, you have the auction online, and it actually bids down the price of goods and services. Where this has been tried in public bodies, it oftentimes saves up to 40% of the cost of procurement. And it's high time that we harness the latest in technology at the federal level.
Adam Andrzejewski is the founder and CEO of openthebooks.com. It's at open_the_books on Twitter if you want to check them out. Appreciate your time.
Great. Thanks for having me on the program, John.